her own family roots and history, and so did that. And that led her to Reverend Mines, who went on a similar journey. Many of you have heard her introduced during our worship service. She'll be preaching at 11 if you have not. As I've kind of thought about this, I thought about the scripture passage where Jesus says to his disciples, if you stay in my word, you'll be my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I think in many ways this is kind of a journey to find that truth. And then see how that truth begins to have a healing power and a power to set all of us free. So I'm going to turn it over to Robin and Ann and let them tell their story. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Ernie. And can you all hear me? Yes. And thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled to see so many friends here. So I'm going to start here with the first slide. As you can see here, we've got some ancestors, some folks from the past. The woman there on the left, Emily Taylor Morris, is my third great grandmother, and she lived at the Meadow Plantation in Virginia in the 1800s.
Hello.
Robin's already preached this morning.
I'm Robin Mines, and this is my ancestor, Guy Mines, who also lived at the Meadow Plantation in the 1800s.
So the Morris family, my family, enslaved her family's ancestors. And we are linked in many ways, but clearly by the painful history of slavery. And our presentation today is about how we found each other and how we connected with other linked descendants, and how we have forged a deep friendship and are working together toward repair and healing.
Right. Just briefly about me, I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, in the Jim Crow era. My grandparents shared a lot of stories of the things that they went through, but as in my sermon as a child at 5, I learned early on that people hated me because of the color of my skin and wanted me dead. And there were actions that proved that. When my parents built a brand new home in 1966, and we had crosses burned in our yard, and our home was shot up, and of course all the racial things that were yelled out when they rode up and down the streets. And so also as a young child, Martin Luther King was killed, John F. Kennedy. And these things I'm trying to absorb, and I'm also witnessing the devastation of the people in my community when these things occurred. Experienced some racism in the military, well, basically everywhere I went, but I had God-fearing parents who taught me to love and not to hate, and to understand that everyone doesn't hate you, that may not look like you. There's only a few people like that. And so I was never taught to retaliate or get revenge. Even though during my young teen rebel years, you get riled up about things, you get tired of getting pushed around, but I'm thankful for the parents in the village that raised me.
Thank you, Robin. And my story is I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, and I knew growing up that my family had enslaved people on a plantation near Richmond. And I had always been curious about that history, but really honestly it wasn't until 2020, during the depths of the COVID lockdown, and after the murder of George Floyd, that I began to really deeply investigate my family's history. I intentionally tried to educate myself about that history by reading lots of books and participating in book studies and workshops with many of you all here in this room. And I jumped into some genealogical research. As Ernie mentioned, in the spring of 2022, I had the great privilege of going on the Civil Rights Pilgrimage to Montgomery and Selma with a diverse interfaith group from Greensboro, including many from Westminster. It was so powerful to me. And on the way home from Montgomery, on the bus, I had a conversation with a fellow pilgrim who's here today. Raise your hand. Karen Skelton is a remarkable genealogist, and her focus is on reparative genealogy. And I remember talking to her and sharing my family story and saying, I had heard all these myths growing up that, my ancestors were the good slave owners. And seriously, and that they didn't really believe in slavery. And I remember telling her that I really was on a journey to explore the truth. I wanted to know the truth about my ancestors, and I wanted to learn about the people that they had enslaved. And I remember asking Karen, do you think it would ever be possible to track down the descendants of the people my ancestors enslaved? And she said, let's try. So what happened over the next year was nothing short of a miracle. Through my own research with Karen's help and a very clear assist from God, I found both white Morris cousins who I had never known and African-American linked descendants, including Robin, who were willing to talk openly and with incredible generosity of spirit about our painful shared history. So Robin was one of those, and how I connected her was clearly a God thing, right?
Yes.
So I had just joined this organization called Coming Together Virginia, which works on bringing descendants together and racial healing. And I was looking online one day at their board of directors. And at this time, I had learned that the family name of many of the enslaved people was Mines. I knew the name, and I'm looking at the board of directors online, and I see Robin Mines, and with her email address. And so I wondered, is there any chance that she could be, a descendant? So I wrote you an email, and you answered very generously, and we talked. And then after that, that's when the miracle really happened, right? So I'm going to start the slides here. This is the first time that our group of linked descendants met, so this was really just last fall. In the front, there is Kate Tweedy. She's about my fifth cousin. In the back, there's Robin. In the back is my third cousin, Sawney, who lives in New Mexico, and I only met her through Ancestry. She came to Virginia. This is Joe Brown here. He's Robin's cousin, and John Pegram, also a cousin. So we gathered and we had lunch, and the first meeting was incredible because we didn't beat around the bush. we jumped right into some really, really deep conversations, and the generosity of spirit at that table was incredible. So at this lunch, we said, well, I wonder if we could get a larger group of linked descendants together, and that's when we hatched our plan, right?
Yes.
We were very fortunate to be able to hold, so we decided to plan an event for the summer and see how many linked descendants we could get together. We were very fortunate to be able to hold the event at Glamorgan. This is the home built by my great-great-grandfather in Virginia in 1850. He was the son of the woman in the first slide, Emily Morris. He inherited this land from his father, Dr. Charles Morris, when this plantation called the Meadow was carved up when Dr. Charles Morris died. So just as an aside, the plantation that was known as the Meadow later became Meadow Farm, and you may have heard that because that's where Secretariat was raised. So Dr. Barton, my ancestor, enslaved 28 people here, according to the 1860 census, and those people lived in 7 dwellings. The property is now owned by a non-family member, but she boards horses there, but she was very supportive of our work. So she allowed us to host the event on her property. And one important note about this area, you'll see there on the map, after emancipation, many of the formerly enslaved people settled near there in this community called Dawn. And many of them still live there today. So the Mines name is everywhere. There's Mines Loop Road, there's Mines Hair Design, there's lots of mines still in this area. So it was easy to find, and with your help, we found a lot of cousins to invite. All right, I'll turn it to you.
All righty. The day of the big event, it was indescribable. I don't even know how to put words to it. But we sent out invitations. Of course, there are a lot of people that aren't on social media, and we didn't have contact, but we trusted God, and the word spread. It spread very well, so we got great response. We thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be something. Then we also prayed about the weather. Because the rain it said it was going to rain, but I kept telling them, what did I say? It's not going to rain. It's not going to rain. And so we got there, and great food. I mean, what a feast. Smoked chicken, fried chicken, hot dogs, hamburgers, potato salad, I mean, you name it, and all kinds of desserts. Overwhelming. We had at least 180 people there who attended, and there were quite a few we're hearing from later who think, oh, I wish we'd known, so we got to do it again. We sang songs, prayers, had storytelling. The genealogy charts were amazing. I had never seen anything like it. Thank you, Karen. And I was able to actually see the names of my ancestors who were enslaved that I was unaware of. I can actually call their names now. I know who they were. And being on the land and where the cabin is, we're not sure if my ancestors dwelled there or worked in there, but it just had such a feeling just being there when I was in that space, just kind of thinking about the past things that went on there. We had a lot of speeches. Yes, the committee, each of us told our stories, and one specific thing that I brought up was that we can't expect,
I'm
here today in part to acknowledge that my ancestors did enslave the ancestors of most of you, as well as of others.
was that we cannot expect, African Americans cannot expect our European brothers and sisters to cross every T and dot every I when you're trying to communicate with one another. We have to understand and be merciful, as I spoke of in my message. Nobody's going to get it perfect, but we have to be forgiving and understanding and embrace one another and meet each other where we are.
So shall I play Sonny?
Yeah, we're going to hear from Sonny, her message at the event. It was very touching.
Yeah. And this is the woman from New Mexico who grew up in Texas and then moved to New Mexico, and she knew nothing about her family history at all. So this has been a really powerful journey for her.
Oh, it was good.
Yeah, you went to.
I'm here today in part to acknowledge that my ancestors did enslave the ancestors of most of you, as well as of others, and for much of 2 centuries, and that the enslavement must have been horrendously violent, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. And that although slavery ended 158 years ago, a profound violence toward Black people continues, and it is anathema. I'm aware that without meaning to, I've benefited from our country's racism and at times contributed to it by acts of omission, failing to speak when I should have spoken, failing to give when I should have given. I believe that ultimately, who I am is a result of my actions, that my own happiness or unhappiness is dependent on my actions rather than my wishes. I believe, along with Dr. King, that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. I can't undo what has been done, but I can pledge to do what I am able, in every way that I am able, to help repair what has been broken in the great circle of our human lives together. May it be so. Thank you.
Next up is Cousin Mike Mines. My first time meeting him was through our meetings. We had several Zoom meetings, planning meetings, and that's how I met Mike. And so we just kind of communicated from there and got to know each other better at the reunion. And he is, his roots are in Caroline, and he was very interested in his genealogy during the COVID. He got busy like Ann did, and so we want to hear from Mike now.
To me, it was quite the revelation. when I first walked this land, I had various emotions, right? First, I was sad. And I was sad that my ancestors who were enslaved here had to shoulder the burden of slavery for so long. And I was angry because that family that enslaved mine gained their wealth on the backs of my ancestors. But over time, those emotions changed. And I'll try to encompass those emotions in a couple words. The first word is proud. I was proud as to how far my family had come from here. One revelation I had when I went to lunch in Ashland. Let me back up. My son, Adrian, forgot his toothbrush, as he always does when we travel. So we went to CVS in Ashland, ran around, and right next to CVS was a Mines barbershop. That was the first time I ever saw a Mines name on a business. Right next to it was a restaurant owned by Amy Mines. I took photos by both. That was part of that pride, in knowing that we have mines all over the country in various positions of influence, private industry, public industry, and also government. The second word is joy. Joy because I found you. I've been looking for this family for over 28 years. And when I first came down and I met some of you at Amy's restaurant, we had lunch. I'm a pretty close to the best guy. I don't show a lot of emotions, but I was pretty happy to meet you. And I plan to meet all of you before the day's end. And the last emotion, the last word I'll use is grace. Because during that visit with my family, Kate Tweedy invited us to her house for dinner. And it was like we were all family. She led with an open heart, she led with compassion, and we had some very honest and open conversations about our family's intertwined history. And it was a conversation unlike I've ever had before. Then she introduced me to her cousins, Ann and Saudi, and we came together with Robin, John Peeber, and we decided to bring everybody together as we have come together. And that's why we're here today. So as I said earlier, this is a joy being here with you. And if I don't shake your hand today, please come see me, because I want to do that. Thank you.
So those were pretty intense conversations, but we also had a lot of fun, right?
Yes.
So here's some more photos from the day.
Here's us enjoying that fabulous meal. In addition to the chicken, we had fried fish as well. So it was really awesome. And the genealogy trees, like I said, they were amazing. Well, one was, 14 feet long? And a lot of things that we didn't know about our family. You know how you find out those secrets, like, oh, that wasn't her dad, or that was, they were married twice. Oh, okay, all right, now, so now we know what happened, okay. You know, things like that you discovered and thought, wow, this is amazing. So thanks again, Karen, for bringing that to us. We had tours of the cabin, and it was great seeing the young people who were really interested. That's what we're really concerned about, because we need to create a world where they can have a bright future. And so my heart was touched to see the young people who were really interested in what their past history was. The stories that were told, we had Eloise Romaine. She was the oldest attendee, 96 years old. Her mom worked in the big house. We had cousin Alvin Mines, who played in the woods near Glenmorgan, not knowing about the cabin that was there. And I believe Alvin also worked with the horses, with Secretariat.
He did.
Yes.
He's a groomsman.
Yes. And there's cousin Joe Brown, who was in the picture with us at the meetings. That's him in the blue shirt. And he's always so emotional and excited about all of the children in our family who attended college and did successful things, who moved on and did successful things. And that's always been a pride of his. Because as you know, that because of discrimination and everything that went on, a lot of people weren't able to achieve their dreams. But we're grateful for the village who stood behind us to push us forward.
So the next day, a smaller group of us met at Randolph-Macon College in a discussion circles. We had small group discussion circles, and these were facilitated by this wonderful organization called Coming Together Virginia that Robin serves on the board. So these were very powerful, deep conversations with questions like, so after yesterday, what would you like to tell your ancestors? The questions, some really thought-provoking questions like that. So there we are in some discussion circles. And then here's our group, and we are continuing to work together. Our next steps, we are continuing to meet. We have a wonderful group text where we share ups and downs of our lives. We meet regularly on Zoom, and our next project is we, through both oral history and old documents, have a reason to believe that there is a cemetery on the property where enslaved people were buried. It's not marked, but we think we know where it is, and so we're working with an archaeologist to try to locate that, and then we want to try to mark that and honor that. We're also working on an oral history project. Robin mentioned Eloise Romaine, she's 96. There are a lot of elders in the Dawn community who have a lot of history, and their stories really need to be preserved. They're so important. So we're working with a professor at Randolph-Macon who has experience in oral history to figure out how to capture those stories and save them and preserve them for the future. Karen is continuing with her genealogy work. And all of her research with all of those family trees that you saw, the paper version, all of that has been uploaded into Ancestry now. So the next time somebody like Mike Mines comes along and is looking for his ancestors, it will be there forever, thanks to digital technology, right? So that's a really great outcome. We're going to build on that. And I'm going to share a personal story as this work continues for me. I continue to have extremely moving and challenging experiences. Just last month, I had a phone call with a woman named Jennifer Morris, who had not been able to attend the event, but her sister had been there. And she wanted to participate in our committee that's looking to try to find the burial ground. And her name is Jennifer Morris. So obviously, when we talked, we acknowledged where our last names come from, right? They come from the same plantation. The fact that after her ancestors were emancipated, they took the name of their enslavers, which was not uncommon. And it was a very, for me, uncomfortable conversation. But she was generous about it, and we talked about it, and then we could move on, and get to the work of trying to honor the ancestors. So that kind of experience to me continues to be very, very just powerful and enriching, and I'm grateful for it. So now Rob and I are going to have a little dialogue, right? So we're going to move from the slides. We have a few questions we've always wanted to ask each other, right? So we're going to do that now, and then hopefully we'll have time for questions from y'all. So this is a question I've truly struggled to understand to this day. So given your history that you shared about how it was growing up, and then our history going back to slavery, why would you even want to be a friend of mine? And why would you want to do this work? And why would you want to dredge this all up? How can you find it in your heart to want to be so gracious?
Well, like I tell people, I was never a slave. And Ann was never a slave owner. So there is no reason for me to have any hate towards her, none whatsoever. I was raised in a home that loves the Lord. And if I'm going to follow Christ, then I'm supposed to be open and love and forgiving and merciful to everyone. And I truly am. I love people. I do. I love serving. I love helping people. I hate to see anybody upset or go without. I've always been like that ever since I was a little child. I used to bring stray children home from school. My mom said, other people bring home dogs and cats. I bring home children. And it's not, I knew the history, I didn't know a lot about my ancestors until this. I knew that we had ancestors that were enslaved. And like I said, I was born in the Jim Crow era. So I was fully aware of racism. But as a child, I had a white pediatrician and 2 white nurses. And they were so kind to us. But then we go outside and we see this other stuff. So I was like, okay, Mom's right. It's not everybody. But it's difficult to maneuver, through who is and who isn't. But just out of love for people. And you're a loving person. And I always get on her when she's afraid of being offensive about something. I'm like, Ann, you're talking to me. Don't worry about it. I'll help you out if maybe you shouldn't say something around some other people. I'm okay. I'm okay. Because as I expressed before, we can't expect people to have it right the first time. But I love the fact when people try and make an effort, and I appreciate that. That's what matters.
I think that sort of generosity of spirit is just remarkable, and I'm moved by it. Robin and I have gotten to know each other pretty well, and you always say when we hang up the phone, you say "love you," and I'm so moved by that, and I think it's a beautiful thing. So thank you.
All right. And my question for you: many people ask this question: why do you want to dredge up all this painful history? Slavery happened a long time ago. What does it have to do with today? Aren't we beyond this? What do you tell people who ask you that?
Yeah. And people do, ask that. And I think it's a legitimate question. People are curious, why do we have to go back into all of that? Aren't we moving forward? Aren't we beyond that? You hear that, right? And for me, as we've done this work, I think there's the importance of just acknowledgement. I was really moved at our gathering how many people came up to me and said that they never heard a white person say these things before. That they never heard just that sort of acknowledgement. Yes, this happened here, this my ancestors. And that sort of honest acknowledgement was really important to people. So I think we're scared to say things. I know I can be sometimes scared to say things, but just telling the truth, acknowledging the truth of what happened in love, and then it makes it easier to go forward for real healing. So I think that's part of it. I don't think maybe we've done that in our country enough, acknowledging the truth. And the other thing is just that the legacy of slavery is still with us. Even here in Greensboro, there are tremendous disparities in our communities, and that goes back to slavery in some cases. I know in my family we were privileged. My ancestors, every male ancestor of mine for 200 years went to college for 200 years. Now that's a privilege. Now, after the Civil War, eventually my family sort of lost the farm, like a lot of people in the South, that happened. But they still had this incredible economic privilege of being able to go to college for 200 years. And the only reason that these ancestors were able to go to college and go to med school was because enslaved people were back on the plantation doing the work, right? So they could go off and have that privilege. So I do think there's this sort of generational privilege that gets passed down, if not through actual money, but through other privileges like education. And so those advantages that we've had as white folks continue to shape our world in terms of the disparities in our community. So I think that's why it's important to understand the history and to acknowledge it, and then to work on the healing. Okay, so this is sort of related, but we've talked often about the idea of truth-telling, and it was mentioned in the service today. So I know for me, I was told a lot of myths, right? We were the good slave owners. I'll laugh, but it's true. And then literally, my fourth grade textbook, History of Virginia, history textbook said most slaves were happy. That was actually in the textbook. So I want to pass on the truths, not the myths, to my daughters. And so in today's world, there's a controversy around how history should be taught, how American history, particularly African American history. So can you talk about the importance of truth-telling, and particularly in connection with healing?
Truth-telling, first of all, if you don't know the truth, how can you live as you should? It is healing because it sets you free, basically, because you know what really happened. Sometimes some of it's tough to swallow, it's tough to hear, but at least you know the facts, and you know how to move forward from that. I think the healing also came in when I read about slavery and all the things that went on before I was born. I could see where progress had been made in the African American communities. I knew that we had a long way to go, but that pride in showing that we were fighters, that we pushed through these things, and a lot of the African Americans knew their truths, but we hadn't linked with our European enslavers, but knowing that truth helped push the civil rights movement. It helped people progress and bring about leaders who tried to stand up against injustice. And also, by knowing the truth, many of you understand what's right and what's wrong, even though there are many around us who don't. But you at least know and have the knowledge of what really happened.
What about the teaching? What about the curriculum? You mentioned that in your sermon.
Oh, yeah, we're trying to redact history. And we can't do that, because if you do that, it repeats itself. And we don't want that. I know I don't. But it's unfortunate that we're banning books. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to brainwash our future generations so that we can control them? That's what I think. Our education systems are failing our kids. They're not being taught what they need to teach, and I encourage each of you to be more involved in public education, because there are powers that be that would like to see it go, so that you would have to end up paying for school. And then we all know what's going to happen there. A lot of people won't be able to do that. So why would you want to live in a society surrounded by uneducated people? That's something that I never got over. You didn't want people to learn how to read, but you're supposed to coexist. That can't be. We have to educate all of our children in curriculums and also in love.
Last question.
One more?
Yeah, one more.
Knowing what you know about your family's history as enslavers and getting to know your late descendants, how has it changed you? Has it changed how you view yourself and your responsibility? What actions are you taking to be part of repair?
That's where it really matters, right? Well, it definitely has changed me. It's been an incredible journey for me. I feel like you've taught me what grace really means. It's helped me let go of feelings of shame and guilt that went along with being a descendant of enslavers, and that can be debilitating, right? That's not productive, guilt and shame. I think it's more important to focus on being honest and vulnerable, to learn and to listen. And for me, I'm trying to do my part, although, I don't feel like it's enough, but I'm trying. So I think these talks that we're doing, these presentations are part of what we're trying to do, to tell the story. I try to use my time and my resources as much as I can to be part of healing. I think I should be doing more. But I do think as Christians, we're all called to be part of healing. I have this sort of history with my family, right? With enslavers, and many of you all may have that as well. And if you don't know, it's really easy to find out these days because all the records are digitized. So really, like before lunch, you could find out whether your ancestors were enslavers. Just look it on your phone if you have a name and a location. So maybe that's your story, and maybe you want to get curious about that like I did, and you never know where that will take you. But I think it's important to ask and to know, because it's where you come from. Maybe that's not your story. Maybe, your family were not from the South or immigrated to this country after slavery. But it's our country's history. It may not be your family's history. It's our country's history. And so I'm going to encourage you to consider going on the civil rights pilgrimage like I did. Westminster sends a team, every year, and I think that this is going to be an ongoing opportunity. So that would be a great way. You would learn so much, and for me, it was really life-changing. And the other thing is that we just live very segregated lives still. You mentioned it's not just at church in Greensboro. We still can often live very segregated lives. And so I would encourage you to take a chance, get curious, reach out, build relationships with people who look different from you. And you may make you uncomfortable. It may be a little scary, but given my experience and all the incredible life-changing friendship that Robin has shown to me and others, I think it's worth the risk. So I encourage you to be curious and move out of your comfort zone. Excellent. Yeah. So do you all have questions for us? We have a few minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's very easy to talk about love when it's reciprocal, but when it is not, and we want to work with one another. I think I heard from you, Reverend Robin, some strategies that we can use so that we can bring people together. Although we may not see things the same way, it's easy to work with Anne because of where she is at this time. But if we want to extend this relationships and bring in more people, how would you do that given your philosophy, which is very similar to Dr. King's as those sermons are in his book, Strength to Love? On a daily basis, how do we develop that kind of attitude so that we can make that kind of difference?
Well, I think we just have to see the sin of racism as it is a sin, just like any other sin. And it calls for forgiveness and repentance. And when you run across these difficult people, you don't try to push it. The only way I know how is to let my light shine. Because on both sides, we had relatives who were a little resistant. Don't think that everybody was all for it now. But I'm the one in the family that they dare not step to with it. They got on Cousin Joe, and he called me up. I said, okay, all right. But I never got nobody, they knew better, because I wasn't going to have it. And so you just kind of pray for those people who are resistant, and you just continue with that love and show them. And there were some who came who had been a little hesitant, and they were so glad that they did. They were blessed because it was sincere. We felt the sincerity of the Morris family when they spoke to us and how they dealt with us. And Ann is one of the most generous people I've ever met. Very kind and loving, a good spirit. And so we connected right away. But those difficult people, leave them to God. Pray for them and show them kindness and understanding, but move on and continue doing the work. Yes?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to add something. Ann mentioned that she found you by going to a website, and it was either coming to the table or coming together Virginia. We've changed our name to Coming Together Virginia. And I think you need to go to that website. I think you will learn a lot. And in addition, we do have a chapter in Richmond, it's Coming Together Virginia. It's the largest one in the country. And when it comes to understanding people and love, we get together, we have conversation, or we do truth-telling. For example, we have a book club, and all of our books deal with racial healing. We watch movies, and they all are related to racial healing. And I don't think you have a chapter here in Greensboro. But it would be wonderful if you could establish a chapter in Greensboro, and Richmond would be glad to help you do that.
Yeah.
That way you get a group of like-minded people together who begin to understand each other and begin to love each other more. Yeah, okay.
Thank
I
you,
love
Barbara.
that.
And Barbara is, was just recently chair of the board for Coming Together Virginia.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I just want to say this is just tremendously inspirational, and in order to tell the truth, it takes courage, and I just want to commend the courage that both families have shown. And Reverend Mines, you mentioned that not all of your family was of one mind about this, and if your family's like mine, I can certainly appreciate that. I just wanted to ask Ann, if you encountered that as well, if there were some differences of opinion, shall we say, about this.
Yeah, absolutely. The truth is that I didn't have a lot of family members there. I don't have a huge family. My brother and his family attended, and I had one first cousin attend, but the others in my family who I invited chose not to come. No one said anything, bad about it, but they just weren't interested. So, I'm going to keep reaching out and telling them what we're doing, and, that's all I can do.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm curious, one of the things that I was really struck by in your sermon today, Reverend Lyons, is the role that God, that love, that faith plays in this work. And yet sometimes we see in our country that same faith is a tool of division. And so if you could comment on your experience with that and helping us stay focused on the way that it can be the tool of, our religion, our faith can be the tool of reconciliation and love versus division.
Well, as I stated in my sermon, that salvation is for all. Whether it's here in America or around the world, it's for all. And if we're going to be followers of Christ, we cannot hate anyone. We cannot discriminate against anyone. We should treat everyone the same as we wish to be treated ourselves. So this is where you start, emulating the life of Christ. And there are those who take the word sometimes and try to manipulate it for their own agendas. But we have to, if we study and fellowship with one another and we know the word, then we don't have to worry about being manipulated by these individuals. Okay? We all have our Bibles, and we all know what the word says. And we know that God is love. And anything that we may do to harm anyone else is not of God. Anything that we do to harm others is not of God. And that's what we have to keep in mind. And that God has created this planet for all of us. He's given us everything we need. But certain individuals feel like they are supposed to control that. And those are the people we need to speak to. They need to hear the word of God.
Thank you.
That's all. I'm aware Robin needs to preach in a few minutes. So, why don't we thank them for their presentation. Certainly Ann is going to be around. She may be heading back up to worship as well, but appreciate you all coming. If you've not yet worshiped, we'll begin upstairs at 11 for our worship service. And again, thank you, Robin, for being here and sharing all this.
Thank you for having me.